Hello, everyone. My name is Irem Sengel-Orgut, and I'll be talking about our paper entitled Equitable Distribution of Perishable Items in a Food Bank Supply Chain that was recently published in Production and Operations Management Journal. This is joint work with my colleague, Amit Lotri. We are experiencing two crises simultaneously right now. On the left picture, you see cars that lined up to receive food from a food bank in Texas during the COVID pandemic. On the right picture, you see a large amount of food waste. In fact, in the United States, 1 in 8 people are food insecure. Despite this high rate of food insecurity, we also see extreme numbers of food waste. In the US, 80 billion pounds of food is wasted every year, which is about 30 to 40% of the entire food supply. Food banks offer a solution that addresses both the food insecurity and food waste crises, as they can repurpose the food that would have been otherwise disposed of and distributed to the food insecure population. They operate from large warehouses where the food is collected, sorted, and stored before distribution. Food banks' main goals are to distribute the food to beneficiaries in an equitable manner while minimizing the food waste. Managing this trade off is particularly challenging for perishable food items as they spoil quickly, which is the focus of our paper. Food banks acquire food from donors and distribute the donations to charitable agencies, which are smaller locations like food pantries with very limited capacities. Those agencies, in turn, put the food in the hands of food insecure families. We focus on the amount of distribution from the food bank to the agencies and have the following research questions. Considering that the objectives of equity and effectiveness contradict one another, we first ask, are substantial deviations in perfect equity required to improve effectiveness for perishable food items? Here, perfect equity refers to the case when each beneficiary receives the same amount of food every period. Since deviations from this perfectly equitable distribution are usually required to minimize waste, we then ask, how should target deviations from perfect equity be managed to balance the equity effectiveness trade-off? Finally, can food banks achieve equity based on quantity and quality, or is there a trade-off between the two? To answer these questions, we build a multi-product, multi-period linear programming model that maximizes both the quantity and the quality or freshness of the food distributed while limiting the deviation from a perfectly equitable solution. We perform a case study using our partner food banks data, which is the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina. To explain our key findings, let's revisit our research questions. This figure illustrates the equity effectiveness trade-off. We find that if we relax equity even a little bit by either allowing equity deviations from perfect equity each period or allowing equity to be achieved over multiple periods, we see large improvements in effectiveness. We also see that, so in this graph, we see the maps showing Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina's service region, where areas' colors indicate their average deviation from their fair share. Darker means greater deviation. The key takeaway is that small but strategic deviations in the service region allows us to control the level of inequity and increase the effectiveness. Finally, we explored the trade-off between the two types of equity. Traditionally, food banks and Feeding America measure equity in terms of weight, but we proposed an equity measure that also considers the quality in addition to quantity. We find that there is a trade-off between the two, but quantity-based equity is harder to achieve than quality-based equity. This was a quick overview. Please see our paper for more details. We would also like to acknowledge that this work was supported by the National Science Foundation, and we would like to thank FBCNC for their support. Thank you for listening.